Good day, everyone. Welcome to the show on this Friday, the 18th of February, 2022. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. Did a show the other day called Jaws. And I talked a lot about how there's big trouble coming. I don't believe it's going to be protests in the form of protests. Right now, around the world, we have different protests going on. One of the most notable is the truckers in Canada right now. It's making a lot of press. You know, the fact that there's a big trucking protest in Ottawa. Uh, this is just one of many. This is discontentment amongst the people. But what I've been talking about in my show, Jaws, has really not much to do with the truckers' protests and not much to do with the other protests that are going on right now. What it's really got to do with is the inflation that's coming. It all boils down to this. Back in 1914, when they started the central banks, they started a process in place whereby they established debt to each monetary unit that's out there. So if you got $1 in your pocket right now, or maybe you got a Great British pound in your pocket right now, or a Canadian dollar, or whatever, there's debt associated with that. How did that debt get there? Well, it comes in the creation process of the money itself. They create the money with a debt associated. That's the interest owed on the debt money that they created. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say that they create $1,000. Federal Reserve creates $1,000. Let's say there's a very low rate of interest attached to that. And maybe it's only $4 a year, the debt associated with that. But money has a way of accruing. And what that basically means is the first year it's $4. The second year it's $8. But now, because you haven't paid that money back, that $8 now is going to start accruing debt on it. And they never create that money. They only created the original $1,000. So you got the $1,000 floating around in this fictitious economy created by the Fed, and there's $4 interest owing on it the first year. What about when 100 years goes by? And they never create. They only create 1,000. So what happens is after time goes by, the debt that accrued is actually larger than the initial sum that they borrowed. And so how do they service that debt? Well, of course, they have to borrow more. They have to borrow another 1,000 to pay on the first 2,000. And then later, they have to borrow 10,000 more. And then 100,000 more, and then 1,000,000 more, and then 1,000,000,000 more, and then 1,000,000,000,000 more, and 1,000,000,000 more. It just keeps going bigger and bigger and bigger. If you ever stop this function and try to pay off the debt, all of the money disappears, what we call money. And this is the trap we're in right now, because they've expanded this debt. And when they expand the debt and they grow it larger and larger, at a certain point, this starts to become unmanageable. Then they create something called leverage. And what leverage basically is they loan money on the debt that they created to other individuals so that they can take on more projects and things like that. And they add additional debt on top of the debt, which creates more money. It's compounding. It's all compounding. And the leverage within the system is things like derivatives products. Things like the whole banking system runs on leverage. I'll give you an example of leverage. Your credit card. Okay. You take your credit card out and you spot a lovely hat at the store. Maybe you're a lady, you spot a lovely hat at the store you want to buy. It's $100. You slide the credit card across the desk to pay for the hat, and they run it through that little thing. It goes beep. It just goes beep, and you've got it. The hat's yours. You just created $100 that didn't exist before. This is leverage, because that $100 truly still doesn't exist, except you owe it back. to them. What they do is they make that as a bookmark entry, the $100 that just sprung into existence, which adds further leverage to the system. This is going on all over the system, times a million, times a trillion. They're constantly adding new leverage to the system or new debt that needs to be paid back. But you get to have the advantage of what that leverage allowed you to do right now. In other words, you were able to have the hat. Okay? But you're borrowing into the future with this leverage. Well, there's big players out there that are doing basically the same thing within the system, and they've created a leverage so large that if the system blows up with all this leverage, in other words, if the derivatives products all melt down and become valueless, then the system breaks apart. And so it's all a giant, enormous trap that we're in right now at this point in time, where they have to keep going forward. They can't go backwards, or the whole thing just deleverages. And that's the opposite of leverage. That's when it all comes apart. Basically, I'm not going to really go into the details of deleveraging the system, the entire system, because it can't really happen. It's only theoretical that you could deleverage the system. But in fact, when the Fed is starting to withdraw liquidity from the system, they are actually starting a deleveraging process right now. So what does it all mean? Basically, it means that our system's going to break, because this was a Ponzi scheme that was started in 1914, a debt-based Ponzi scheme. And we've reached the end of the line now at this point. And that's why the Fed's trapped. They're at the end of the line. There's only one direction that they can move. They're going to have to keep the system leveraged up with even more debt. And where I was going with that show called Jaws is that the people are going to have to start paying back. Now, you've heard economists all say out there, at some point we're going to have to pay back this debt. And they're going to pay the debt back now. Now's the time. Through inflation. So they're not going to deleverage the system and have all the dollars go poof into thin air. The dollars are going to stay in your bank account. But what's going to happen is they're going to be worth less and less daily. And it's going to be ever increasing and ever faster over the next couple of years. And so where I was going with this show is, how much can the people take before the people actually start to starve? And hunger is the most powerful motivating force. We see these signs of unrest in things like the truckers' strike and things like that. These are just signs of something immensely bigger that's coming a couple years from now, when the people have to start paying these debts back through a hidden tax called inflation. It's basically going to put such a strain on the people that the people in the final stages are just, they're either going to accept it or they're not. My take on it is they're not going to accept it. But I might be wrong. If they do accept it, they're just going to, well, there's no other way of putting it. They're not going to be able to afford to eat. There's a limited amount of food on this planet, too. And unlimited amounts of money. And your wages will not keep up with the cost of inflation. And the final stage of this thing is where you can't afford to eat any longer. It's too expensive. How it starts is, it starts like it's starting right now, where you see food prices rising and you're a little bit short every month, because you used to only pay maybe, say, $300 or $400 for food every month, per person or whatever, and all of a sudden it goes up to $600 and $800 and $1,000, and your wages haven't kept up. But it's going to get to a point where you have to make hard choices. Do I pay the rent this month? Do I pay my electrical bill? Or do I buy food? And then later, it's not going to be a hard choice anymore. You're only going to have enough money to buy food. And then after a while, you're only going to be able to have enough to buy half as much food. And then a quarter as much food. And then you're going to find yourself going hungry. And you're not even having enough food to have enough energy to go to work. And inflation's still going to be going higher. And in my mind, this is just a no-brainer. What's going to happen at a certain point, the people are going to say, hey, we're going to starve to death. We're not going to starve to death because we are going to feed today. That's what's going to happen. They're going to feed at any cost. And run for the hills. That's all I can say, because it's going to be en masse. Because everybody's going to be affected by this. Except for the really ultra-rich. It's never going to touch them. They get bags of money. They got bags of money big enough where they'll be able to afford food even when it's $1 million for an apple. But as far as the rest of us is concerned, which are by far the largest percentage of the population, is the rest of us, the rest. So how do you solve all this in the end? It's going to have to be a restructuring. And you can't take this embedded fiat monetary system and restructure it over to something else. I don't know exactly what else it would be. Probably something that has hard money or solidly backed money that can't be just printed to infinity. But you can't make that transition without the system basically collapsing for a period of time. And I think myself a rapid transition would probably be 4 to 6 months long, during which chaos would be the order of the day. And so people would be on their own during that period in time while the system restructures. I truly believe that after the system restructures, we're going to have something better than we have now. What we have now is a world full of uncertainty. It's hard to even raise children in a world that's so full of uncertainty where you don't know what's going to happen next. Our world has been stripped away from us and been replaced with bizarro land. Anyway, guys, where does cryptocurrency stand in all this? Because I often talk about cryptocurrencies on this channel. Well, it used to be the only way out of the fiat currencies was gold and silver. Then 2009 happened. Something came along called cryptocurrencies. And we all know the rest of the story. It offers an alternative way out of the dollar and the fiat currencies, an alternative to gold and silver. And if you look at their track record, these cryptocurrencies, from then till now, they've done rather well for themselves. There's no reason to assume they will not continue to do very well for themselves, especially because the higher inflation is just around the corner, which acts as a driver for cryptocurrencies. In the early stages here, they are in competition with gold and silver. Make no mistake about that. But I see in the later stages, there won't be a competition any longer. Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies will be running on one train track in the same direction as gold and silver, and they'll be on another train track all their own. And both trains will be going up the mountain. Fiat will be crashing over the cliff, falling over the side of the mountain, and burning at the base of the valley. While cryptos and gold and silver will be going up the mountain. And anybody that has say a 1 ounce gold coin And some other guy is trying to get out of fiat at that particular time when fiat's losing value daily at a more aggressive pace daily. And they'll ask to trade, and he'll say, no, I'm not trading you my gold coin. Guy says, well, I'll give you $10,000 for it. Look, cash right here. You take the cash? No, because tomorrow it's going to be worth $20,000. So the guy says, well, I'll give you $20,000 for it. I'll give you what it's worth tomorrow. Guy says, no, the next day it'll be worth $30,000 or $40,000. I don't want the cash. They're going to be desperate to get out at a certain point. There's going to be more, and I've said this for years, there's going to be more of this fiat floating around than there are leaves on the trees outside your house. And how much value do you put on the leaves when you rake them up every fall? You don't put much value on them, do you? Well, you're not going to put much value on a dollar bill in a certain period of time because all it is a darn piece of paper. Anyway, guys, I've rambled on for 16 minutes. Thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe. And this was the second part of that show called Jaws. We'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.